Welcome to Life Stories. In today's story, we explore the powerful journey of a young woman who navigates the challenges of unexpected change, fear, love, and growth. It's a tale of personal transformation, guided by wisdom passed down through generations. Join us as we dive into her story, filled with raw emotion, lessons learned, and the beauty of embracing life's uncertainties. Life may not always go as planned, but it always teaches us something valuable. So, sit back, relax, and let's begin today's journey together. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more inspiring stories. I met Jack during my sophomore year of high school. He wasn't just any guy, he was the star of the football team. With a smile that could light up any room and a charm that seemed to come so naturally. To a shy, introverted girl like me, Jack was everything I never knew I wanted. He wasn't just popular, he made you feel like you mattered. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, truly understood, like I was more than the quiet girl at the back of the class. The one whose dreams were always whispered only in the confines of my room. Jack was different. He listened when I spoke. He cared about the things I didn't even know how to express. We spent hours after school talking about our future. About everything we could do if we just stuck together. There was a lightness between us. As if we could take on the world, one dream at a time. He'd say, "We'll move out, find a little place somewhere exciting, and maybe even start our own business. We'll build a life side by side. Something unstoppable." At 16, it felt like we were invincible. Love, at that age, feels eternal, doesn't it? I thought we were in this forever. That we had something so special. Something no one else could understand. I believed, wholeheartedly, that this was the kind of love that would last. That we'd grow old together, planning our next big adventure. Forever intertwined. And yet, after graduation, things changed. It wasn't as abrupt as a slap in the face. But there was a shift, slow, subtle at first, but undeniably real. The day after graduation, when the caps had barely hit the ground and the summer stretched out ahead of us like a promise, Jack started pulling away. It was like a tide retreating from the shore. Slowly but surely, texts that used to come through in the blink of an eye suddenly went unanswered for hours. Then days, the walks we used to take in the park, holding hands and talking about all the things we were going to do. Those walks grew fewer and fewer, eventually becoming non-existent. And when we did meet up, Jack was different. He didn't want to talk about our future anymore. He talked about how he needed to focus on his college entrance exams. How he had set his sights on Georgetown or Stanford. He was so fixed on his goals, his dreams, and I just wasn't a part of them anymore. I tried to be understanding. I told myself it was just the stress of exams, the pressure of what came next. But deep down, I could feel him slipping away from me. Little by little, it felt like watching the pieces of something beautiful break off and drift away into the unknown. One crisp October afternoon, the kind where the sun slants through the branches of the trees and the leaves are painted in shades of gold and red, Jack and I were walking down the gravel path in the park. Near those old oak trees we used to sit under. It was a familiar walk, but there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. And then, suddenly, he stopped, just stopped, mid-stride, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. I turned to look at him, a knot forming in my stomach. Something wasn't right. "Emma," he said, his voice clipped, distant, "we need to talk." My heart dropped. "Is something wrong?" I asked, trying to hold it together, brushing a strand of dark hair from my face, my eyes searching his for any hint of what was coming. But Jack wasn't looking at me. He kicked at a pebble, staring down at the ground, like he couldn't quite bring himself to face me. "Look, this relationship, it doesn't fit anymore," he said, the words coming out in a rush. He didn't even look up. "I've got big plans. I'm applying to schools, chasing a career, and this," he waved his hand between us, "this is holding me back." My breath caught in my throat. I could feel the words slicing through me, the jagged edge of his words cutting deeper than I could have imagined. Holding him back? I thought we were in this together. I thought we were a team. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But it cracked, betrayed by the pain rising up in me. You said we'd figure it out. College, life, everything. Jack finally looked up, but his hazel eyes were distant, resolute, and in that moment, I saw the truth. I'm sorry, Emma, I've made up my mind. It's better this way, for both of us. And just like that, he turned and walked away. His familiar blue jacket grew smaller with every step he took down the path. And I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to move. He didn't look back, not once. The autumn wind picked up, tugging at my scarf, but I barely felt it. My chest was hollow, aching, the kind of hurt that spreads and engulfs you whole. How could he just toss aside everything we had? Everything we dreamed of, like it was just baggage he didn't need anymore? For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, staring at the empty trail he had left behind. The crunch of the leaves underfoot faded into silence. My heart was in pieces, scattered like the debris around me. How could someone who once said they loved me just walk away so easily? How could he discard everything we had shared like it was nothing? It wasn't just the love I was mourning, it was the future I had imagined. The future I thought was ours. The dreams we had built together. The plans. The hope. It all felt like it had vanished in an instant. But I was starting to realize, even as I stood there, that this was only the beginning of the struggles I would face. A few weeks after Jack vanished from my life, I would face a challenge far bigger than heartbreak. But that, as they say, is a story for another time. Days turned into weeks after Jack walked away. But the emptiness lingered. It clung to me like the autumn chill that never quite left the air. I tried to move on. I threw myself into my routine, school, homework, pretending like everything was fine. But in the quiet moments, when I was alone with my thoughts, it all came crashing down again. I couldn't shake the image of him, walking away without a second glance. It felt like betrayal, like the foundation I had built my whole future on had crumbled to dust. And then, just when I thought I couldn't feel more broken, something else happened that I didn't expect. Something that would change everything. It started with the signs, missed periods, a queasy stomach, and an aversion to the smell of coffee that had once been my lifeline. I tried to ignore it, dismiss it as stress or the aftershock of Jack's departure. But as the days went on, the symptoms only grew stronger, more undeniable. One evening, feeling sick to my stomach and unsure of what to do, I walked to the corner drugstore and bought a pregnancy test. In the privacy of the upstairs bathroom, I locked the door behind me, the cold plastic of the test digging into my palm as I waited. My heart hammered in my chest, the silence of the house echoing around me. The minutes stretched out, agonizingly slow. I had always been careful. I had always done everything right. But now, I found myself staring at something I wasn't prepared for. 2 pink lines. It hit me like a freight train. The world seemed to stop. And all I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. My breath caught in my throat as my mind raced. What was I supposed to do now? I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for the responsibility, for the consequences of everything that had happened. But the reality of it was right there, undeniable and real. I shoved the test into my sweatshirt pocket, trying to push the rising panic down into the pit of my stomach. I forced myself to go downstairs, to pretend everything was normal. Dinner's ready. Come on, it's getting cold. My mom's voice echoed from the kitchen, too bright, too oblivious to what was brewing in my mind. I dragged myself to the dining room, my legs heavy, my thoughts swirling. The smell of meatloaf and gravy filled the air. The same Tuesday ritual. Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Trembling, I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. My dad lowered the newspaper, peering at me over the rims of his glasses. His face creased in confusion. What's this about? You look like you've seen a ghost. My mom froze, her hand hovering over the mashed potatoes, the serving spoon still dripping gravy. Her eyes darted to me. Sensing something was wrong, I could feel her worry. But I couldn't bring myself to explain. I was too afraid. I'm pregnant, I managed to choke out, the words splintering as they hit the air. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom's hand flew to her throat, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. My dad's face turned from pink to red, veins bulging at his temples. The newspaper fell to the table with a sharp smack, as if the sound could cut through the tension in the room. Pregnant? My mom shrieked, her voice high and frantic. How could you be so stupid? So reckless? What's everyone going to say? My dad's voice was low and dangerous. You've ruined your life and ours. He growled, standing up abruptly. Who's the father? That Jack kid? The one you've been hanging around? I flinched, my tears threatening to spill over. It's complicated, I said, my voice cracking. He's gone, Dad, but I can handle this. I swear I will. Handle it? My mom's voice rose to a near hysterical pitch. You're 17, Emma. How are you supposed to handle a baby? What about school? What about us? The neighbors will talk. The church will talk. I didn't mean for this to happen, I whispered, barely able to keep the sobs from breaking free. I'm scared too, but I'm not running away from it. My dad's bitter laugh cut through the air, cruel and cold. Scared? You should be. You have no idea what you've done. He slammed his fist on the table. This isn't some little mistake you can fix with an apology. You're not raising a kid under my roof. End of story. I took a step back, my heart aching at the harshness in his voice. My mom's protests were nothing more than a faint echo in the background. Her voice twisted with grief. But my dad's was louder, sharper, and unyielding. Get out, he spat, his words like daggers. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. Tears flowed freely down my face as I stumbled to my room, the weight of their rejection sinking into my chest. I was still their daughter, but I wasn't wanted anymore. And as I packed my things into a duffel bag, my hands trembling, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I couldn't stay there, not when they made it clear they didn't want me, didn't want my baby, didn't want the life I was trying to build. I grabbed the photo of Jack and me from last summer, the one where we were both smiling, arms around each other, and shoved it into my bag. It was all I had left, memories of a love that was now gone. I glanced one last time at the house that had once felt like home, and stepped into the cold, harsh winter air. The world was dark and uncertain, and I had no idea where I was going. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't stay. I made my way to the bus stop, my duffel bag pulling at my arm, the cold wind biting at my cheeks. I had no plan, no clear direction, but there was one place I could go, my grandmother's house. It wasn't much, but it was a place where I could be safe, where I could figure out what to do next. With every step I took, the weight of my parents' rejection and Jack's absence felt like an anchor. But I kept moving, because sometimes, that's all you can do when the world feels like it's falling apart. The bus ride to Linton was a blur. I sat there, the world outside the window moving in a haze of passing lights and darkened streets. But inside, everything felt like it was crumbling. My heart was heavy, weighed down with the loss of my parents' love and Jack's absence, and the fear of what was to come. I couldn't seem to push away the overwhelming sense of failure, the voice in my head telling me I wasn't enough, that I wasn't prepared for what was happening to me. I had no idea how to face the future, let alone raise a child on my own. But there was one person who had always believed in me, even when I hadn't believed in myself, Grandma Margaret. She lived 2 hours away in a small town called Linton. I hadn't seen her much in the last couple of years, but I still remembered the warmth of her home, the smell of chamomile tea, and the soft, comforting sound of her voice. When I arrived in Linton, the cold hit me hard. The streets were empty, the small town quiet, and the air crisp and biting. My heart raced as I walked the 3 blocks to Grandma's house. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of my uncertain future pressing down on me. But then, when I reached the little brick house with the sagging porch, something shifted. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of something, a small but powerful sense of hope. Grandma's house was exactly how I remembered it. With the garden blooming even in the cold of winter. A patchwork of colorful flowers peeking through the snow. I stood there for a moment, just taking it all in, before I finally knocked on the door. Almost immediately, the door creaked open, and there stood Grandma, her silver hair pulled back into a loose bun, wearing her faded quilted robe. "Emma," she said, her voice warm and welcoming but edged with surprise. "What on earth are you doing here?" I didn't have the strength to hold it all in anymore. As soon as I saw her, I collapsed into her arms. I could feel her warmth, her steady presence, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. "Grandma, I need to stay with you," I said, my voice breaking. "I have nowhere else to go." She didn't ask any questions. She didn't press me for details. Instead, she just held me tighter, her arms strong and reassuring. "Of course, you can, darling," she whispered, her voice as steady as ever. "There's always a place for you here." Those words felt like a lifeline. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't completely alone. I had a family, even if they weren't the ones I expected. Grandma Margaret had always been the rock in my life. The one who never wavered. The one who always believed in me when the rest of the world seemed to turn away. And now, more than ever, I needed her strength. She led me inside, where the familiar smell of old wood and chamomile tea filled the air. The house was cozy, cluttered with memories, old furniture, shelves of mismatched teacups, and the soft hum of an old radio playing some late-night jazz station. It was the kind of place that made you feel like time slowed down. That made you feel like you could breathe again. Grandma Margaret made me tea, and we sat together in the living room. The silence between us comfortable. She didn't rush me to talk. Didn't push me to explain myself. She just let me be. And that was exactly what I needed. After a while, I started to feel like I could breathe again. My chest, which had been tight with anxiety, started to relax. But the fear of what came next still lingered in the back of my mind. What was I going to do with this baby? How could I raise it when I was still so young? Still figuring out who I was? What did the future hold for me now? Grandma Margaret must have sensed my unease. Because after a while, she set her mug down and looked at me. "You're strong, Emma," she said quietly. "You don't need to have everything figured out right now. One step at a time. That's all. We'll manage together, like we always do." Her words were simple, but they gave me the strength I needed. The idea that I wasn't facing this alone, that I had someone who believed in me no matter what, was the lifeline I hadn't realized I so desperately needed. That night, as I lay on the couch in Grandma's living room, the quiet hum of the radio soothing me to sleep, I realized something profound. Life was never going to be perfect. And it certainly wasn't going to be easy. But with the right people by your side, even the hardest battles could be faced with strength and courage. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened, I wasn't alone anymore. Grandma Margaret was right. I could face this. One step at a time.